Okay, we are live. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks with Santosh. And today we have a very special guest, Nader, who is joining us. And we are going to talk about AWS Amplify. And I hope I could have actually talked about Ethereum and whatever you are doing new, but it's I just wanted to talk about AWS, and probably we can meet again sometime in future to talk about the things you are doing. I mean, you are doing so many things at a time. So thanks a lot for joining us, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about Amplify. I'd love to talk about anything AWS cloud related because I'm still really passionate about that as well. I mean, I did it for 3.5 years, and I kind of really believe in that as well. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about anything.
Thank you. Hey Vijay, thanks for joining. So Nader, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, sure. My name is Nader Dabit, and up until maybe 2 months ago, I was working as a senior developer advocate at Amazon Web Services, leading the front end web and mobile developer advocacy efforts. And worked there for a little over 3 years, helped kind of grow the awareness and the adoption of a lot of serverless technologies and full stack technologies at AWS. And before that, I was running a training company, React Native training, and did that for about a year, consulting and stuff. And now, currently, I'm building and participating in a lot of interesting stuff in the Ethereum and decentralized web ecosystem at EdgeNode.
Wow, that's amazing. So, as we said, we are going to talk about AWS Amplify. So, can you just tell about what AWS Amplify is?
What AWS and Amplify is?
Hmm.
Yeah. So basically, I think when people think about AWS, they often think about backend services, infrastructure, DevOps, and things like that. And it's typically for a long time was kind of thought of as being something that was only really approached by backend devs or people that already understood AWS. And one of the things that our team wanted to do was to build out different tooling and abstractions that allowed full stack and even front end developers to be able to build out the scalable applications on AWS that a lot of them wanted to do, but there was too high of a barrier to entry. So Amplify is kind of like the, I would say, efforts in the team that is building and focusing on the front end and the full stack community, the Jamstack developers, the mobile developers, and the web developers that are typically like working on the client. And everything that we've done was to kind of really try to open the doors and lower the barrier to entry to AWS for those types of developers. And we provided a bunch of different things for that, a front end frameworks for all the different web clients and JavaScript frameworks and mobile clients, as well as a CLI that allows you to create and manage your AWS services using a very high level abstraction that is a lot easier to pick up than maybe going into the AWS dashboard and playing around there or even learning something like CloudFormation. And over the years, we built out a bunch of different things like Amplify Hosting, which is a really, really simple way to host your static or now SSR sites with Next.js and stuff, as well as a couple of other different things like part of our offering is AppSync, which is a managed GraphQL service that could be comparable to something like Coursera or maybe even Firebase, but it's GraphQL. And it's probably my favorite thing that we got to work on at AWS. It's one of those things that is something that you learn and you're able to use and build a lot of different things. So it's like one of those things, like to me, like React, where you learn it and you're able to build out web and mobile apps and all these other things. With AppSync, you're able to basically have an API gateway into almost all of AWS, and you're not really limited on the types of databases like you are maybe some of these other framework or some of these other managed services. So you're not limited to Postgres, you're not limited to NoSQL. You're actually, you can use SQL, NoSQL, Elasticsearch, Redis, anything, like all within a single layer. And it's extremely powerful, scales up to like tens and maybe we've seen almost hundreds of millions of active clients, connected clients at one time, which is, something that is really hard to do. So, yeah.
I thought it's like just similar to what Firebase is, but looks like it's a huge platform.
Yeah, I mean, I would say most of the customers that we used to get that came over from Firebase were doing it because of the flexibility. I think with Firebase, it's a really great service. For first of all, I'm like a big fan and all that, but I think they would often run into limitations on their data access patterns because if you're
Hmm.
given a single data source or a single database, you're kind of limited to the API of that database. Whereas I think with a lot of modern applications, you need different data access patterns than maybe one
Right.
database is going to give you. So you could probably build out like something fairly good, kind of get your startup going. But let's say you wanted to build out like Airbnb or Twitter or something, you need to take it to the next level. You need probably NoSQL, SQL, Elasticsearch, Redis. You need all these different database access patterns that are not available from a single database. And I think that's really where AppSync, a lot of people moved over to that because of that.
So how to get started? I mean, in case I want to start using AWS Amplify, what are the ways how I can get started?
Yeah, I think one of the most easy ways to get started is just to use the hosting service because you can literally go to the Amplify dashboard and click a couple of buttons and connect your GitHub repo and you're deployed. And just maybe clone a repo from, or maybe create a React project, push it up to your GitHub, and just connect it and deploy it. And it's very similar to Netlify, except it's on AWS. And yeah, it's
Okay.
pretty simple to get up and running with. And then once you're there, you can start playing around with other stuff. But I think the simplest way just to host a site takes like a couple of minutes, and then from
Oh,
there, I would start looking at the main things that people typically use when they're building an app: storage, authentication, API layer, database, those things, and start playing around with them. You can add authentication in a couple of minutes. Actually, you can add a GraphQL API within another couple of minutes, and maybe add S3 or
oh,
something like that.
wow, that's nice. I mean, another question: is it open source or is it like you have to pay for it?
So yeah, Amplify is open source. All of the client libraries and stuff are open source, and the CLI is open source. Essentially, what it's
Hmm.
doing is allowing you to use AWS services. So you're going to pay for the
Okay.
AWS services, but you're not paying for the actual libraries and stuff. So if
Ah,
it's
okay.
a service, you're paying for it. But if you're just building something locally or maybe installing stuff and all of that, and like you're not going to be paying to use the tools themselves.
Okay. So, I mean, you mentioned the authentication, right? So, if I want to actually test it locally, are there like libraries available which can mock it, or it's like I have to really connect to AWS Amplify services?
Yeah, I think for authentication, you do have to connect to the because it is a service. It's like Auth0. It's kind of hard. I mean, I don't know if you can mock Auth0 locally, but you can't
Uh-huh.
mock the authentication of Amplify locally. But the cool thing about Cognito, which is what Amplify uses under the hood, is that you get 50,000 free users for your account. And most of the time,
Oh,
testing out and even launching an app, you don't get to that point. And most of the time, we find that if someone has reached 50,000 users, they're really past the point of like where they're worried about it being free because you probably are able to make money at that point.
agreed, agreed. Yep. So there is a question in chat. Let's take that. So Vijay has this question: how different is AWS Amplify from S3 plus CloudFront?
So a lot of people use S3 and CloudFront for hosting, and that's a
Mhm.
really nice combination because it's scales really well because you're able to serve from edge locations, CloudFront, over 200 edge locations, and it caches at the edge, and it's really nice. But I think like a lot of people um, want that, but they also maybe are getting up and running with AWS for their first time, and it's kind of complicated for a lot of people to do that. So Amplify is just a lot easier, and essentially under the hood, what it's using is S3 and CloudFront. But Amplify gives you a bunch of other stuff as well that you don't get with Amplify. With S3 and CloudFront, you get you get CI/CD built in, so you have like this pipeline where you can have merges or branches that create a new deployment. So, like, let's say you have a main branch and a development branch and a feature branch, you can basically just push to GitHub and automatically have a new deployment tested out and then merge that. It has all that stuff built in. And I think that pipeline is a little harder to build out if you're using S3 and CloudFront on your own.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, deployment previews are really amazing. Whatever platform you use, it saves a lot of time. I mean, to verify the changes.
Hey, what's up, Dom? I see him in there.
Hey, Adit.
And I'm sure there's a few other people I know in here, but I just don't know for sure. But yeah.
Yeah. So there is another question: is AWS Amplify equivalent to Azure PaaS web apps? If you have to compare.
You know what? So Azure Platform as a Service web apps. I've never used that, and I don't know a ton about that actually. So it's hard for me to say. I would say the most common like comparison, and a lot of the people that kind of are like going back and forth between the two are Firebase. So we have a lot of people that investigate Amplify, and they investigate Firebase, and they kind of choose which one. And me personally, I'm a big AWS person, but I'm still going to tell you, like, they both have their own trade-offs. I think that Firebase is good for certain people, and Amplify is better for certain people. I really think the power of Amplify like really shines with the GraphQL API as a service. I think like AppSync is one of those things that you can implement, and like your app can go from 0 to 100 million users, and it's going to scale. And I think that's the real interesting part about it. But also, like, I'm a big fan of GraphQL.
So what about platform support, right? So you mentioned, okay, I can just go ahead and set up my CI/CD, but when it comes to the platform support, how is that?
Yeah. So with the client libraries we have teams literally like iOS team, Android team, React Native team, Flutter team. So we basically have teams that build out client libraries, full support, for all of these different clients. So if you're a native iOS developer, we have a native iOS team building out the clients and taking issues and improving that. So we have client support for Flutter, React Native, native iOS, native Android web. We have JavaScript platform support for the frameworks of React, Vue, and Angular.
Oh,
as well as
I was
React
about
Native, I think I mentioned.
okay. I was about to ask Angular because, of course, I use Angular a lot. So, great. So there
Yeah.
is a question from Hitesh. So he says, what is the difference between Amplify and AppSync?
So
Okay.
Amplify, so like if you've ever used Firebase, there's Firebase, which is the framework and the tooling, and then Firestore is the database. I think that's kind of similar to how you might say Amplify is the entire suite of tools, and AppSync is the actual database service. That's
And
kind of the way I would do it.
you can connect any database as you said, right? So with AppSync, I can use NoSQL, SQL, whatever I need.
Yeah, absolutely. And the best thing about it is that you can basically also connect to you have this GraphQL schema, and you have all these mutations and resolver. I mean, mutations and queries and such, and you can basically map those operations to any data source in AWS or outside of AWS. So we even see people with like MongoDB mixing in with databases native to AWS, and then they can add their microservices and all working through this single API endpoint, this single schema. And it's super, super nice for your front-end developers to be able to consume all of the different back-end services using a single API, which is GraphQL. And it makes it so much easier for new developers to get onboarded to your client application, and a lot less time ramping up and stuff like that.
So it means I can just have an Apollo GraphQL endpoint or Prisma endpoint, and then I can just connect it to my own GraphQL endpoint inside AppSync. This is what
Yep.
I understand. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so how about the features? So you have been working on this platform from a long time. So if you have to actually list three important features which are actually important for developers in your thoughts, so what that would be?
So I would say, like, if you look at the usage of what everyone's using, you could definitely bucket almost the majority of usage around the authentication for sure. It's just, almost every app pretty much every app, I guess, needs it at this point. So authentication, and then the API layer, which really is kind of a combination of API and database, and then storage. And I think just using those three layers, you can, or those three things, you can build out like 90% of most apps, you know, because if you think about like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, like what do they have in common? They have authentication, they have images and videos, and then they have like data. So like mixing those three things together, you can do almost everything. I think it's only like the other 10% that is maybe weird different things, like maybe machine learning, or I don't know, whatever other type of like thing that might be a little different. But I think the core of most applications is going to be covered in those three things.
Oh, right. What about the advantages of this platform, and in case you have any cons, if you want to tell us?
The cons?
First, let's
Uh,
talk about the advantages.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the pros and the cons. Yeah, I'm very like objective about everything. Like I try to be very straightforward about like my views on stuff, because I don't think like anyone's gonna ever stay at the same company forever, and you have to just keep your integrity with you like wherever you go. So even when I was working at AWS, I was always quick to point out the pros and the cons. So I like this conversation. Um, I think for the pros, it's really, really easy to get started with AWS. It's like a really great entry point. And I've even seen a lot of people get jobs and stuff because they learned AWS through Amplify, and they were then able to like double or triple their income, which to me is like so cool to see. And I think it's one of the most fulfilling things about when I was working there, is seeing that type of stuff. So it's really easy to get onboarded. It's really fast to build. You can build out your prototype in literally like hours or days for a lot of things. I mean, it's like seriously like that fast. And the certain pieces of it are extremely scalable. So the storage is S3. I mean, S3 is used at scale around the world, and it has been. The API layer, AppSync, is extremely scalable. And those are kind of like the pros. It's easy to pick up. It's fast to develop on. Every AWS is something that's trusted and that you can get hired for to do, and you can build out really high scalable apps. And I guess the cons. For the cons, I would say that the Amplify CLI is one of those tools that, even though it's been around for a couple of years now, there's still a lot of, in my opinion, like work that needs to be done to make it easy for teams to work together on. So like if you have a single developer and you're building it out, like you're probably okay. But once you add like 3 or 4 developers and you try to like manage the team building the app together from the CLI, you often run into like issues and stuff that are hard to resolve, and it's often hard to merge the changes together in a single project. So like really what you end up happening is like when you're using the Amplify CLI, you're using an abstraction on top of infrastructure as code. And if you've ever worked with infrastructure as code, it's typically like YAML or JSON or something where you're kind of writing out, I want this database with these configurations, and then you make an update, you add or you modify something, and then you like, deploy it. And when you deploy it, it kind of kicks off a new build on AWS and all of that stuff. So when you're using the CLI, you're basically like typing commands, and then we're generating the CloudFormation. And the CloudFormation often gets mixed up when you kind of like have multiple developers working together in a way that makes the build actually break. So your merge happens fine and all that, but when you try to run the build, sometimes you get some error because there are some bugs and stuff. It seems a little buggy. When you have a lot of people working together, so you end up having a broken build, and at that point it becomes sometimes hard to kind of like roll back, and I've even seen where people have had to kind of like start a new project, or not they're not like really losing their project, they're just having to rebuild it again because they're kind of like hit a wall where it gets broken or something, and they weren't keeping up with version control properly and stuff. So that's one of the things. The CLI to me like needs some improvement. It's really great to get up and running with, but I think once you get like past the intermediate part where you're building out like a complex application, or you have multiple developers, it starts maybe running into some limitations. And to me, like a better option down the road, like if you've gotten your project up and running and you're happy with it and you want to like take it to that next level, what I would end up doing was I would keep Amplify on the client, and I would still use, of course, all the services like AppSync, But instead of using the CLI for the infrastructure as code, I would probably move to something like CDK. And CDK has a lot more flexibility, and it's a lot easier to work with, I think, with large teams. And I
Thanks for
mentioned like how
that.
good, yeah, I mean, I mentioned S3 and AppSync are really great services. I think on the other hand,
Mhm.
Cognito is like a pretty good service, but it's not like a great service. And in fact, there are certain issues that are not fixed that we've been asking them to fix for like 2 years or so that they still haven't fixed. So I would say like investigate Cognito because it can work really well and it is scalable as well. But there's also a lot of downsides to it. And if you run into one of those downsides, you might not be able to actually, build the exact feature that you want because it's a managed service. Therefore, you don't have full control over it.
Okay. Okay, let's take a few questions from the chat. So Vijay has this question: does Amplify offer a web server where we can put authorization logic?
Yeah, most of the services that Amplify enables are serverless services. So there's a couple of ways to do authorization logic with Amplify. First of all, you can basically have a Lambda function where you just invoke it in some way directly or indirectly that passes in some data, in your header or something,
Mhm.
and you can do some logic there. But Cognito, which is the authentication service, also has something called Lambda Triggers, that are basically functions that you can call within the life cycle of the authentication or the authorization that is happening. So let's say, for example, when a new user signs up, you want some
Mhm.
authorization logic that checks their email address to see if they are part of maybe like a student group, like maybe they're like .edu email address. You want to maybe place them in like a certain user group and give them special permissions. Then you can have something called a post confirmation trigger, which means like after they've confirmed that they've signed up and all of that from MFA, then you would call this post confirmation trigger and then pass in all of the metadata from their sign up, and you would have a function that gets invoked. And you can do whatever you like. You can call a database, or you can maybe even modify their information in the Cognito service. So yeah, there's a bunch of different ways you can place authorization logic.
Yep. So Aditya has this question. I have tried to look into Amplify, but I felt a little bit intimidated. What do you think would be the best way to get started with? So
To get started with Amplify.
yeah, I think he means that. So I'm not sure if he is getting some error or he's getting some challenges doing that. So, but you said CLI is the best way,
What's
right? So
normally
you
good?
can.
Yeah, I would say like the easiest way would probably be to go to the getting started guides and maybe find the framework that you like to work with the best, and just
Mhm.
go through the authentication part, because I think that would be the easiest way to get started. And it's kind of like a really easy win. It should only take a couple of minutes maybe to get set up, and then you have something working and you kind of like feel confident. And then if you feel good at that point, then maybe start adding more complex features like an API layer and database and stuff. But I think the getting started guides on Amplify documentation are actually pretty good.
Mhm. Oh, that's great. How about resources to get started? So if I want to learn AWS Amplify, I'm sure you have a lot of resources on your YouTube channel. So in case anyone who is looking to get started with AWS Amplify, just go ahead and take a look at the YouTube channel which Nader is running. But apart from that, if you have to actually list out few resources.
Yeah, so the getting started guides again the getting started guides are really good in the Amplify docs, and we also have a new, fairly new entire guides section of the docs that are kind of meant to be the next iteration of like after you've got started, you've built out a couple things, like what do you do next? So we have like these end-to-end guides. I think we might have like 30 or 40 of them at this point that teach you how to do all types of stuff, and they're basically just like tutorials. So those are really great. My YouTube channel is great. I would say that we have a repo that's called Awesome AWS Amplify that has maybe 100 or so tutorials that we've curated from the community. That's a really great place to check out as well. Yeah, and I'm looking right now to see Awesome Amplify if I have any pull requests, because I haven't checked it out in a couple of weeks. I have one pull request.
No.
I'll go ahead and
So
merge that.
yeah, sure. If you want to share this link, just share it so I can post it in the chat. You can
Yes.
share it in private. Yeah.
Yeah, let me go ahead and share this.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh yeah, I'll send it to you and I'll let you share.
Yeah.
Cool.
Great. So apart from AWS, sorry, AWS Amplify, not AWS Amplify, but you mentioned AppSync. Is there any other services which you want to actually point out, which is really great? Apart from, you already mentioned authorization, authentication, and then yeah, AppSync. What else is there?
I think that you've a lot of people have seen a big increase in people interested in DynamoDB. The DynamoDB database is something that I've like become more interested in as well, and it's really cool and fun to work with. And I think the most compelling thing about it is like again, like we talked about building things that scale and that are like also
Mhm.
inexpensive and that also are kind of like very robust because like a lot of these databases that come out these days are like fairly
Mhm.
new and they're really cool, but like some of them are actually really expensive once you get past even a couple of thousand users. The cool thing about DynamoDB is that it literally is infinitely scalable. So you can scale it to, I mean, literally like infinite numbers, the way that the architecture is built. So we've seen applications that are doing trillions of operations on DynamoDB that continue to work extremely performantly and performantly. And I think the interesting part about DynamoDB is that the more data that you have and the more partitions that you have, the faster it gets. So it gets even faster the more that you add to it. And to me, that's like really wild. And it's extremely, like, in my opinion, inexpensive. So I think it's like a million queries. It's like 25 cents or something like that, or maybe $1.25. I forgot if it's a dollar. Let's just say it's even $2 for a million operations. That's like pretty cheap for something that fast and that scalable. So yeah, so that's cool. Of course, we mentioned AppSync. I mean, Lambda is one of those things that is just really amazing, and it's if you understand how to use it, you can build out so many things, and you can become extremely valuable to a team. And you see other companies literally building entire companies on top of things like Lambda and Cloudfront. So, for instance, Vercel and Netlify are built literally on top of these services. So, if you can just understand how to use the service themselves instead of these abstractions, you can be extremely valuable as a developer at a team, or you can build stuff yourself. And instead of maybe using one of these other services, you can just use the underlying services and save 10x or so, whatever their markup is.
So is there any? I'm sure you have been involved with the community for a long time. Any developer who is doing amazing stuff for AWS Amplify and you want to give a shout out?
Yeah, I saw that Michael Leenda actually yesterday just got hired as a developer advocate on the Amplify team. So that's
Mhm.
really awesome. There are so many different really great people in the community. I would say the community builders, like most of those people are doing really cool stuff. And I don't want to like give one of them a shout out because they're all like really good. And I would feel like I'm leaving some of the other ones out. Um, but I would basically check out, you can basically like follow. I think there's a website that has the community builders like listed out, and I would follow them.
Ah, okay. Uh, uh, what's the name? What's the URL?
Community builders, AWS
Okay.
community builders. I don't know the website actually. I'll have to look.
No problem. Let me just check out and okay. If you don't mind, I mean, can you just share a little bit about what this AWS community builders are? Builders is actually.
Yeah, that's like a good topic and subject to talk about. And so yesterday, like I mentioned, Michael Leenda got hired as a senior developer advocate on the Amplify team, and he was a community builder. And I thought one of the most interesting things that he tweeted out about his being hired at AWS was that he said he was the sixth community builder to get hired at AWS. So like I think like the
Wow.
cool thing about the program is that a lot of these people end up getting like leveled up in their jobs like really fast. And so anyway, Community Builders is like a community program that AWS runs that highlights
Mhm.
and helps people that are building on AWS that are doing interesting stuff. So like if you're interested in AWS and you have like an idea for a blog post or a video, then I would suggest like just going ahead and writing that blog post or that video and publishing it, and then applying for the Community Builders program and giving them the link to that, because they're basically looking for people that are building in public and that are sharing their work, and also maybe helping in other communities and stuff. And if you get accepted into the program, you get invited to a Slack channel. You get a big box of swag. You get invited to different private events. You get money to use on your AWS account, and you get more visibility for jobs and stuff. And a lot of them, like I mentioned, end up getting hired at AWS. So if that's something you're interested in doing, working for, I would definitely check it out. A lot of benefits.
Sounds interesting. I mean, I have been part of multiple programs, so yeah, sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's like the Microsoft MVPs or the
Yeah,
Google whatever. I forgot what the Google
GDs
people are.
and
Yeah, GDs.
yeah. So Vijay has this question: how does blue-green deployment work in Amplify?
I've actually not really done a lot of that, so I don't really know. So I would
Mhm.
probably have to, do some pull up a link or something like that and share it, because I don't really have a lot of context there.
Sure, no problem. I mean, you can share it with me. I'll be able to add it in description, so that will
Yeah, I
work.
mean, I would
Thanks.
assume that would be fairly easy because Amplify has a lot of CI CD stuff like built in, so you can
Mhm.
basically um, have rollbacks and stuff like that.
Mhm. Wow, that's great. So thanks a lot for answering all those questions, Nader. So I cannot see any more question in chat, and uh, so is there anything you want to promote apart from whatever we have discussed AWS Amplify? But is there anything else you want to actually just promote in our channel?
Mm, I don't know. We talked about some of the stuff that I was kind of interested in for sure. I mean, all the stuff I was working on at AWS was like really really fun to work with, and I'm always excited to talk about all that stuff. I think for me personally, I can just kind of shout out some of the stuff that I've been interested in a little bit more lately. Some of the work that we're doing at Edge and Node is focusing on some of the, I would say, Web3 stack. So I've been diving into a
Mhm.
lot of that, trying to learn a lot about that. I think the most interesting thing that I've learned is that there are so many different communities of developers out there that I'm sometimes that it's hard to be aware of everything going on. So like I just dived into this community a few months ago, and I'm realizing that in this world that it's more wild than the world I was in before. But like I thought the market was like really hot at AWS, which it is. A lot of people are like hiring those types of developers, but it seems like in this space it's even a little bit crazier. Like people are making a lot of money and they're hiring a lot, and there's a lot of companies that are building stuff and they're having trouble finding developers. So I would say like if you're interested in expanding your skill set and maybe broadening your opportunities for jobs and stuff, definitely look into cloud and serverless, but also consider looking into blockchain, Ethereum in particular.
Great.
That's the
I
way
mean,
to
I can
go.
see. Yeah, I can see a lot of developers are already getting a job because of the contents you are creating. So thanks a lot for doing that actually, because I can see a lot of developers who actually tagged you on the Twitter that okay, they just because of your new videos and blogs, they were able to actually crack the interview. So that's amazing. Thanks a lot for doing that again.
Yeah, that's been so cool to see. Like I've had 4 people now that say that they kind of like got into the space because of some of the stuff that I said. And one of them tweeted that they actually got the job because of me. I don't know if that's like 100% true or not, but either way, I thought that was pretty cool to see. And I've had countless people reach out to me. Like I literally can't count the number of people that reached out to me just asking me questions about the area because they were too interested in moving into it from a traditional web background. And the coolest part about it is that there's so many people hiring that no one is expecting you to already know the stuff so you can learn on the job. So, for instance, when I got hired, I knew nothing about this stuff, and they're just like, they just want people that know how to like write some code to come in, and they'll give you some time to learn on the job. And as long as you show some interest in like having like that growth mindset that you're gonna be able to learn, and maybe you already know a programming language like JavaScript or Python, then you should be good to go.
Oh,
I found like
that's
there's like
great.
less competition, I would say, for jobs in this space versus like the space I'm used to. Like, you apply for a job and web and the traditional web background. There's probably like 100 other people applying, whereas
Again.
here, like someone that is hiring might not even get one or two apps, so they're more likely to maybe give you a shot. Just my 2 cents, so maybe I'm wrong.
That's great. Yep. Yeah. So we are done. For the day, and thanks a lot again, Nader, for joining us. It was amazing to actually hear about AWS Amplify. And as I said, probably next time we will meet again to discuss about the Ethereum and the other Web3 stuff you are doing. So thanks again for joining.
That would be awesome. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on, and it's been an honor to like be here and talk and stuff. I've, me and you follow each other for a long time on Twitter, so it's cool to actually do this collaboration. So I appreciate everyone that showed up and everyone in the chat and all the great comments and stuff. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their week or weekend,
Thank
I
you.
guess now.
Yeah, already a weekend. So apart from that, on closing notes, we will have another episode next Friday, 10 p.m. IST, and we are going to talk about the TypeScript, not TypeScript, but advanced. Sorry, TypeScript, but advanced TypeScript. So we will be talking about that, and so that's next Friday, 10 p.m. IST, and we will see you again. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for joining.